everyone, welcome back to my channel Hasty Books. I'm Camilla, and today I thought I would finally go over the books that I read in November. It was quite a busy month. If you follow my channel, you'll know that I was doing a buddy read with Jay from the channel My Quarter Life Crisis. I also took part in Nonfiction November. I also read some German translations book for my year in reading and translation. And there's a few other extra things in there, but it was quite busy. It was a bit of an intense month, I guess, ahead of the holidays, ahead of our potential travel, which have now, I guess, been officially cancelled. So it's just been very stressful. And I'm sure I'm not the only one, who has had a harder kind of time. There's actually even 5 days in November that I didn't read at all because we had a COVID scare, and there's just general anxiety, like it's such an unsettling time that I think a lot of people relate to, having sometimes not the capacity to focus and read. So yeah, that's when sometimes I turn to audiobooks, which are very good, but even that sometimes it's really difficult to pay attention to. But anyway, I still managed 16 books in November, which is still like loads. The majority were quite short, so I didn't like go completely all out. Like I don't think that I did the most reading, and like as much as I had some anxiety, like some of my anxiety was channeled through listening to some audiobooks and reading fun escapist novels. So yeah, it's been a mixed bag November basically. I wanted to start with a little bit of stats because I love to look at the stats on the store graph. It's so beautiful the way it's represented, and I just love to see like what they've highlighted as like my top moods, top genres, like just all of that. I just love it. So the first thing I wanted to highlight was that I did kind of a 50-50 split in terms of nonfiction and fiction, which I thought was great. In normal time, I may have wanted to do a bit more of nonfiction reading, but there's a couple of reasons why that didn't happen. I will get into that when we get to the books, but yeah, I was quite pleased with the split. So 8 books nonfiction and 8 books fiction. My top moods, which I'm going to put the little graphic here, were reflective, challenging, emotional, and informative, which I think really goes in the kind of spirit of nonfiction November. Like you really can tell that that's what I was participating the most. And even some of the fiction that I read, some of it was a little bit of this more emotional and reflective as well genre or mood a little bit. And as I said, the majority of the books were below 500 pages, so I think there was more than half actually. So there was loads that were really, really short, like literally just reading it in one sitting. So that's why I feel like I was able to get through a lot. And I really like sometimes, especially if I have anxiety or stuff like that, that I decide to read something really short, so it kind of makes me feel accomplished. So generally in November, my reading was separated into 3 categories. The first 5 were the buddy read that I did with Jay from My Quarter Life Crisis. So they were This Is How You Lose a Time War by Max Gladwell and Amal El-Mohtar, Barbara the Slut and Other People by Lauren Holmes, You Should See Me in a Crown by Leah Johnson, The Family Fang by Kevin Wilson, and finally, the only one that was nonfiction was We Should Hang Out Sometime by Josh Sundquist. And they were really good. I really enjoyed them. I think my favorite one may have been Barbara the Slut, which is a collection of short stories. I thought it was really, really vivid in representing the experience of like early 20s kind of people who are heading, into the real world and stuff like that. So I thought that was really well done. We met recently to talk about those books, so I picked 5 for her as well. So we kind of discussed all of those 10 books together, and it was so fun. My video talking about the 5 books that I just mentioned will be probably available in a few weeks, at some point in December anyway. I'll edit that soon and you'll be able to hear my thoughts on those 5 books, and I look forward to doing more buddy reads with Jay in the future. The second part of kind of this November reading was Nonfiction November, which I participated in for the first time, and it was so great. And sometimes I'd be like, I want to have an audiobook to listen to, and I'd be like trying to find something, and I'd be like, okay, I need to pick something that's non-fiction. So good to have that little push to be like, okay, I need to read something that's something that you enjoy, you know. And I think you'll see in the range of books that I'm going to mention just now, what kind of interests me in terms of like sports and travel and immigrant experience, and just a little bit of everything. And it was so good. I will be wrapping these books in my next video, so I will be doing a two-part because it was just going to be too long, and you'll be able to hear my thoughts on the 7 books. Obviously, I did say that I did 8 nonfiction read in November. The 8th one was We Should Hang Out Sometimes by Josh Sundquist, which I did buddy read with Jay. The 7 nonfiction books that I read were The Uncertain Sea by Tsui. This was actually an essay, so it's not technically a book, but I was actually going for like an hour's run, I think, and that was like an hour and 10 minutes, and I was like, oh, I'll just put it on and listen to it while I'm out and about. And it was actually so good, and it really gave me the taste for going for her full book, Why We Swim, which I ended up listening to as well, I think in the following 2 weeks, and it was so good. Anyway, I won't reveal more, I'm just naming these books. Next one was The Untold Lives of the Women Killed by Jack the Ripper by Hallie Rubenhold, which I also loved. The next one was The End, Surviving the World Through Imagined Disasters by Katie Go. This is a really short non-fiction kind of essay written and published through 44 Inc., which is like this small local publisher in Scotland. And they've been doing a series of like timely, I guess, themes and discussions. And this obviously discusses what we're living through in this pandemic, but also looking at different kinds of disasters we have in movies and in books. And it was so good. The next was A Race Like No Other, 26.2 miles through the streets of New York by Liz Robbins, which was about, the marathon in New York City. I think it's a 2007 marathon. So it was actually so good. I want to read a book like that for every single marathon like in the world because it was so good, but I will discuss more on it later. Then I did read How to Do Nothing, Resisting the Attention Economy by Jenny Odell. I discussed that in my TBR. That was on my kind of, I think it's style that I pushed it a little bit in the category in the prompt that was for this year's Nonfiction November. I read it, it was so different than I expected, but I did enjoy it. And finally, the last one was The Dragons, the Giant, the Woman, a Memoir by Wayétu More. I had heard about this book through the Edinburgh Book Festival this year. This is basically about her, I guess, journey from living in Liberia to becoming a refugee and an immigrant in the US, and then going back to Liberia. I had loads of thoughts about it. And I also want to read her fiction book, She Who Would Be King, which I think is also based in Liberia. So yeah, very, very exciting books. You will hear more thoughts about it in my next video, so please come back for that. Finally, the last 4 books that were on my list for November, well, they weren't on my list, but they're on my list now of books I've read. They were 4 books that they were a bit random. They're the last 4 fiction books that I'm going to be discussing today. So 2 of them were for my reading a translation from German. So they were The Little Paris Bookshop by Nina George and The Royal Game by Stephen Zweig. I really enjoyed The Royal Game. I read quite a few of Zweig's short stories, and they all are so interesting. They all have a twist as well, which I never see coming, and it's just so well written, and I want to keep going reading his short stories. This was about a man who ends up, I guess they're on a boat with this really incredible player, chess player. I think he's the champion in the world, and they end up kind of asking him to play against them. And I can't go into more details actually because it's just so interesting the way that it's built, and it has like stories within stories. Like a lot of his short stories and novellas have that, where there's a narrator, often unnamed, who's talking to someone who's telling them their story. And so there's it's very meta, where there's a story inside a story inside a story. But yeah, his writing is wonderful. I really, really recommend it. And I thought this was a really short and wonderful story. The Little Paris Bookshop. So Nina Joy, I believe, is a German writer. So I wanted to read something from Germany, which I realized I don't think I'd ever really read anything from there, a novel, and I really struggled to find the novels I really wanted to read from there that weren't like about the war as well. So I picked this one because I thought it was going to be like something lovely, and it's about a bookshop. I was really frustrated by this book. I almost DNF'd it. I ended up skim reading the second half because I was like, okay, I want to know what happened, but also not enough to read through this whole book, which it wasn't that long anyway, but still, it really didn't do it for me. I love the idea that this man basically decides to take his floating bookshop, which is obviously in one of these like long boats, and to take it all the way down to the southern part of France and from Paris, and like along the way he kind of accumulates his companions. It becomes a little bit of one of these kind of aimless quests when aimless people just end up all together and all looking for something, but they don't really know what or where they belong. That's why they're there. So I feel like there was that aimlessness to this book. So there's this love story where the guy, oh god, I hated that. So the guy was really sad because his partner left him. Turns out that she was married to someone else the whole time. So he was basically the other man. And he was really sad that she left to be with her husband or whatever. And 20 years later, he's still not over it. And that's kind of what triggers this whole quest and this whole story. And I really did not love that. There's a lot about it that I just didn't love. So yeah, let's call it quit. Like, there's just, I'm not recommending it. I don't think I do want to read anything else by Nina George. That's how much this was just not for me. And the writing, just everything just wasn't quite what I'm looking for. So yeah, let's move on to the next one. The next book was actually Shadow of Night by Deborah Harkness, which was it's the second in the Allsouls trilogy, which is part of the Discovery of Witches. So I actually forgot that I had a hold on this book, which is why when it came on like the 2nd or 3rd of November, I was like, oh no, this is a huge book. I think it's like 600 pages. And I was like, oh no, it's gonna really slow me down with all these other reads. So I feel like if I hadn't had this book to read, I would have read more nonfiction. But also, I just had it from the library, so I decided to just read it. And I actually enjoyed it, which is surprising because I read the first one, The Discovery of Witches, last year, and I literally almost chucked it out the window. There was a lot of it I didn't like. It was like too long. It needed to be edited down. There's a lot of tropes that are used that I hate. I think that my disappointment for the first book came because I loved the TV series, like just absolutely devoured it. I've watched I think I've watched it 3 times now, and yeah, absolutely loved it. So my expectations, I guess, were high for the book, and they were definitely disappointed. And then the second series, I didn't love it as much. The first book hadn't made me want to read the second book, so I was like, oh, okay. But I ended up just, for some reason, requesting a hold on it. So I read it. I think because my expectations were so low, I ended up enjoying it. There's a lot still that I didn't enjoy about it. A lot of the same kind of deal from the first book. I love the tropes of her feeling empowered and wanting to be a feminist and wanting to be like, oh, you don't control me. But then also being like, oh, well, he's a territorial, manipulative creature. So it's just in his nature to be like this. So that's okay. And I'm just like, wait to have an apology for toxic masculinity, you know? Like, it's just, yeah, a lot of that I've hated. However, I think because my expectations were so low, when I finished it, I actually felt like, okay, I would read the third book. So I feel like that's, you know, a win. I think I will definitely be going for the third book. I don't know when the third series comes out, but maybe I want to read the book before the series. Anyway, a lot of thoughts. But generally, I don't think they're great books. But I love the universe and I love the potential of it so much. And I think that that's what annoyed me about the first book, is that I just feel like it's such an interesting concept and it could have been done so much better. So yeah, so that's disappointing, but we shall see. And the last fiction book that I read for November was actually really random. I reread Animorphs, well, the first in the Animorphs series, which is called The Invasion by Catherine Applegate. So this is one of the books that I recommended to Jay because I love that she's been rereading these like kind of kitschy, or like, you know, YA sometimes have this quality to them that you're just like, okay, it's a bit like an exaggeration, whatever. And I love that she's been rereading that, and they all have a little bit of aspect of science fiction. So I thought, oh, that's something that I really liked when I was younger. And I know that it was not that well done, but I really wanted to recommend it to her and see like what she would thought. And then I reread it as well because I hadn't actually read it since I was like young, so it was really interesting to reread it. It was much shorter than I remembered, and also it's just everything, like Jay said in our video together, as you'll see, it's very expository. Like, it's a lot of like, this is what's gonna happen, this is what's happening, rather than stuff actually happening. So an interesting concept. I think both of us realized that as younger girls we probably would have liked it more, but obviously in our late 20s, early 30s, we're just like, maybe not. But it was still fun to read it, like reread it with her and discuss it, and kind of, you know, go back into the memories and reminisce a little bit, you know. These were the 16 books that I read in November. Thank you for watching. If you want to hear more thoughts about my nonfiction reads, you can come back later this week. As always, if you've read any of them, you've liked them, disliked them, if you agree or disagree with me, I think especially like the larger books that I think a lot more people have read, like Discovery of Witches, please let me know what your thoughts were in the comments. I just love to hear what people thought, especially like it just starts a little bit of discussion. Sometimes booktube can feel a little bit one-sided when we're just talking in the camera and we're like, hello. So yeah, please, you know, let me know any of your comments and just say hi, and hey, see you back. Bye.